So I guess we should start.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So good morning once again, everybody. I hope my screen is also visible.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so whatever we have discussed till now, that includes the .NET architecture, the CLR architecture, the .NET runtime execution, and the components of .NET framework and CLR, the services offered by CLR, and then the C# fundamentals followed by object-oriented programming. Please let me know if there are any questions, any doubts about the same.
Saket, the last time we discussed about the method hiding, means not
Yeah,
discussed exactly. So means
yeah,
what I find that only it can be achieved by putting the new keyword in the inherit class.
that's right. That's right. And in the parent, you don't require anything to be mentioned. Just like for overriding, you need to have virtual
Virtual, correct.
or abstract defined, right?
Yes,
With new, there is nothing required like that. And with new, basically, the signature you keep same. I mean, return type and number of parameters you can leave as it is. But the entire definition, I mean, the body of the method can be completely different. The difference basically is how you call the methods when we compare it with method overloading. So suppose there is class A, there is class B which inherits from class A. Class A contains a method called as display and class B overrides it. Now, while creating the object, let's say I do it like this. A, obj A equals new obj A. And then I call obj A dot display. Which display method will be called?
the
From
inherited class.
no, from A only, because here on both sides of the equal to operator on line 1, I have the class A only, right?
Yes. Yeah,
This should be A, right? So this has no relation with the derived class. Correct. So in this case,
correct.
purely I'm saying that, okay, this is just like person class, right? Person P equals to new person and person dot display. So it doesn't know anything about employee. And in this case, it is surely going to be the display method from person class, right? At the same time, if I say B, obj B equals new B, and then I say obj B dot display, which one will be called? From A or from B?
B. If it is method hiding, then it will call from B.
No, in case of overloading only, I'm saying.
B only.
B only, because outright on both the sides of the equal to operator, we again have the class B. It will search the display method in B, and if it is overridden, the display method from B will be called. Straightforward. Correct?
Yes.
Trick thing starts when I say A obj A2 equals new B. And then I say obj A2 dot display. Now in case of method overriding, again method overriding only I'm saying, which one will be called, from A or from B?
B.
It will be from B only. And this is the case when the setup is like this. I have class A. Which has got a method public void display. I'll make it virtual as well so that I can override. It can be either virtual or abstract. With abstract, there will be no method body, right? Here I have a console.writeLine statement, which displays display method called from A. Right? And then I have class B. Here I say this is overriding the display method, which is there in the base class A. And here I have display called from B. Clear? So no matter what type of object you define, I mean, what is the data type of the object or the variable representing that object, it always is going to call the implementation from which instance you have actually created on the right hand side. What my point?
Yes.
On memory, which instance is there? It's B class instance, so it will be always called from B. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Now, how
Yes.
the method hiding goes? I'll just copy the same thing once again in a separate tab. I'll make certain changes. There is no virtual. Virtual may or may not be there. That's okay. That's not a compulsion. And here, instead of overriding, I use new. It could be public new or new public. One and the same thing. Now tell me what will be the cases one by one over here. So consider case one. A obj A equals to new A, obj A dot display. Which one will be called? No doubt here. It has to be A.
A. Yes.
Left and right, both sides are A. Same is the case here also. Left and right, both are B. So it should be from B. There is no difference till here. Difference comes here. In case of method hiding, it is not right hand side which decides which version will be called. It is the data type of the variable representing the object which decides which version is going to be called. So here, in this case, it will be from A because the data type is given as A. Is it clear?
Yes.
So in case of virtual, it will be A or B.
In case of virtual, we saw that it is going to be from B. In case of virtual, I mean overriding,
Yeah.
what matters is right hand side. Understand? And in case of method hiding, when you are using the new keyword, what matters is the left hand side. Now, based on how you are creating the instance, how you are actually initializing your object, it's getting decided that which version will be called. And this is done at runtime. So both are representing late binding. The message going in is exactly same. Return type is same, name is same, the parameters are same. So technically the message going in is same. And hence, this basically falls under the category of polymorphism. Both of these, method hiding and method overriding. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, so that was the assignment. right? I hope this is clear to all.
Yes.
So just a quick question.
Uh,
For method overriding, which side of the equal to matters?
Right side.
Right
Right.
side. And method hiding is left side.
Left side.
Okay. Yeah. Someone tried asking some question.
yeah, Ankit. So in case I am trying to create uh, B object equal to A means in that case it will throw error, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that will be something like upcasting, which is not going to be allowed by default. You need explicit casting for that, right? You have to convert it to class B. Parent can hold the child instance, but child cannot hold the parent instance into it, right? Because the structure of the object is different. Is it clear?
Yes. So how do we typecast that one?
Explicit typecast will be like this. What you are talking about, if that needs to be tried anyhow, let's say B obj B you are creating equals to new A. This is what you are looking for, right?
Yes, yes.
So this needs to be typecasted with this, where you have to say typecasted to B. And once you do this, basically it is a statement similar to this only. Understand?
Yeah.
Left
So
and
with
right both become B in this case. I mean, both become same. So there is no question of finding out from where it will be called. It will be called from what you have mentioned. Simple. Right? This is something what we call as explicit casting. A pointing to B by default is happening. So this is implicit cast. But B cannot point to A, where A is the parent class. You need an explicit cast for that. There is another alternative to this. You can write the same statement like this also. Obj obj B equals, within parenthesis, I'll say new A, as there is an operator in .NET called as, precisely C sharp. And there I say, what is the target data type I want to convert it. Understood?
yes, Ankit. So both line 28, 29 similar, right?
Yes, yes,
But syntactically it is different.
yes, correct. I hope this is clear.
Yes, Ankit.
Anybody, any other question before we proceed?
In line number 27 and 28, ultimately we are casting to another type. So which one is
Yes.
better as a performance or as a security or as a technical perspective? Which one will be best practice? Line
See,
number 20.
performance wise, the native object type is always recommended because there is no conversion required, right? No memory management required.
Mhm.
Okay. Casting should be done when and only when there is no other option available.
Okay.
And usually this is done when you are having some client server or distributed architecture being implemented within your application. Understand?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So as far as possible, go for this.
Mm-hmm.
Rarely you should be going with the casting. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So shall we proceed to today's agenda?
Yes,
It's
Ankit.
more on the design principles today. And next session will be more on design patterns. So obviously the first question comes in as, what is design principle? What is design pattern? And what are the differences between the two? And what is the relation between the two? Relation is that they complement each other. While implementing design principles, you need to probably make use of certain design patterns without which design principle implementation may not be possible, or even if possible, it may be incomplete, not correct. Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes.
They complement each other. Like food and water have no direct connection with each other, correct?
Yes.
But they complement each other. Without water, we cannot live. Without food, we cannot live. Both are required and both play their own roles, correct? Sometimes food contain water. Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. So that's what we say, that something complements the other. That's the relation. Okay. Now let's focus on what is design pattern, followed by what is design principle, and the differences between the two. So definition wise, first of all, we'll talk about design pattern. Any idea what design patterns must be? What is design in this? What part of
Relation.
software development process it might be related to?
We should design the classes as per the business needs. That is design pattern. That we should
Yeah, somewhat there,
reuse the.
somewhat there.
Yeah,
So it
we
has
should reuse.
something to do with the architecture of the software development, right? Or
Yes.
architecture of the software, simply. Yes,
Yeah, means we should follow the OOPS principle, means OOPS concept in that, so we can do the code reuse
correct,
also.
correct. Almost there. So basically, we discussed about and saw the implementation of object-oriented programming principles in the last class. Correct. Now, the point is, do we use all those things in the recommended manner all the time? Because some feature is introduced with some purpose all the time. If we are not using that feature according to its purpose, then we are not actually making use of it in most optimized way, or we are either overusing it or underusing it. Yes or no? Just because something is there, we should not be using it. Just like these days, most of the vehicles, two-wheeler, four-wheelers, all come with some power mode. The names might be different. Four-wheelers usually term it as sports mode. Then two-wheelers name it as power mode or something. Point is that increases the RPM of your engine, which gives more power. Correct. Just because this feature is there, should we be using it all the times? There is a specific need where this feature should be used. Am I right? Where more RPM may be needed. Like if we are climbing some slope, some hill, probably more RPM will help us to climb smoothly. Whereas less RPM probably will put more strain on the engine. Yes or no? So there are some guidances available. How we came up with these guidances? Any idea? Sometime
So
in the past, probably developers might have faced some issues. Later on, they found that some of these issues probably are recurring issues we are facing again and again. So some research happened based on which we found some solution for that particular problem. After implementing that solution in multiple different scenarios, they found that, okay, the solution may not be applicable as it is in all the scenarios, but there is some common crux around it, which probably can be followed, and then people can build on the top of it to get their actual solution for that particular scenario for this problem. Right? So they learned with some sort of experience, trial and error to start with, which became a research later on. And ultimately, people got some experience out of it, which was documented somewhere that, okay, for this kind of situation, in these conditions or these parameters or this environment, we did this to get the solution. It may work as it is for you, it may not work as it is for you, but yeah, you have some sort of documentation available, so your research need not start from zero. Probably you can start at some point with the directions mentioned within that solution in that documentation, and then your research can involve around making that particular solution suitable for your own scenario, your own environment. That will save time or not?
Yes.
Correct? Your research doesn't start at zero milestone. Probably it starts at 70% of the work. Only 30% is the research work you further need to invest in terms of time and efforts. Am I right? Which is always better than starting at zero. Correct? It will be saving your cost as well. Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. So based on this, we can come up with a definition. Let's put that here in formally. Design patterns are specific solutions to common, recurring, or repeated problems in software design. One line definition. If someone asks for this is enough. But then if some description is required, you can add on something more. Like what exactly these design patterns do, what they provide us, how they assist us, or what benefit do they give. So let's put that also. They provide proven solutions to design challenges, allowing developers to leverage the collective experience of the software development community right? Then furthermore, I can add design patterns are more focused on addressing very specific design problems and providing templates for structuring code. Now, when I say providing templates, this templates is nothing but some sort of documentation which is available around the problem statement and its solution. So using that template, you can start your own research work. Make sense? Now, if
Yes.
we talk about the most popular design patterns in object-oriented programming world, These are actually created by 4 friends, and that's why they were named as GOF, Gang of 4 patterns, which furthermore are divided in 3 categories. Creational patterns. What do you understand by this name? Creational means something which creates. What it creates is object. We said that this is basically more for object oriented programming. So when I say creational patterns means it is all about the patterns that assist us in getting the object instance created. Understand? Knowingly or unknowingly, you might have used some of these patterns already in some of your existing work somewhere. Maybe during learning, maybe while working on projects. Like, I hope most of you must be aware of singleton object. Yes or no?
Yes.
What is singleton object?
Single object is
Only
used
one
to.
instance of the object can be created, and that has to be shared throughout wherever it is needed, right?
Yes.
How do we implement it?
Using singleton resemble.
No, but what is the way? Suppose if I ask you to create a singleton class in C# or any other language, how will
Using
you ensure that it is singleton?
using private constructor and just giving the getting getter property for to create the instance of
That's
that
right. It
particular.
could be property, it could be some method which gives you the instance of the object, right? Constructor becomes private, so it can be called only by the member, and we just keep a track of the count of the instances. If the count is 0, then only the new instance can be created. If it is already 1, the same instance which already exists has to be returned. I can simply say return this. This is the current instance of the object, right? So if instance is already there, I return the copy of it, I mean reference of it. If object is not there, I create and then return the instance of it or reference of it. Yes or no?
Yes.
Constructor becomes private means I cannot directly allow any developer to create the instance on their own. I have to provide a method or a property which does that for us or for further developers, right? So some sort of encapsulation also implemented here about the object creation. And because this is about object creation, singleton is actually a pattern which comes under creational pattern. Is it clear?
Yes.
You must have heard about some factory methods or abstract factory methods or something like that. These are also creational patterns. Factory method is like some static method which gives you the instance of your class n number of times whenever you need. You cannot instantiate the object on your own. Usually this is done when the object depends on some other objects also. So only object creation is not required. You probably need controlled object creation in a very tightly controlled manner. You want to keep track of how many instances are created at a time. Suppose it's a client server application wherein I see this object is very resource intensive and my server hardware cannot support more than 25 objects at a time. So I have to keep track of the number of objects created. Probably again, here I need to go with the private constructor and some static method which returns me the instance if available. Correct? This method comes under factory method. Yes.
Yes,
So,
Ankit.
so wherever you are talking about object creation, how object is created, the pattern being used is categorized into creational pattern. Then comes structural pattern. Any idea what this structural pattern would be? What kind of structure we are talking about? It's all about the composition of the objects, right? Especially when you are talking about defining some sort of relationships between two or more objects, which results in creating more complex structures. So here probably you might think about the design patterns like adapter, decorator, composite, etc. Understood? So easier one to understand at this moment is adapter. You know what is adapter in real life also. Everyone is using the laptop or the smartphone or both. To get them switched on, to get them charged, we use an adapter. Yes or no? Any idea why that adapter is needed? It actually connects two different worlds, provides a relation between two different worlds. Your devices are actually running on DC current, direct current, whereas the supply that you get in your home is all alternative current, AC. Yes or no?
Yes.
Now, how do we make sure that the AC current doesn't damage our device, but rather get it charged and get it powered on? We need some conversion or not? Some logic is required or not? We do. That's where the conversion is actually behaving like an adapter, and that's why those things are called as adapters, right? They consume AC, convert it to DC with logic, and then satisfy the needs of the DC devices. Even your inverter that you might be using at your home uses the same thing. It has a built-in adapter into it, which takes the AC current in, converts it to DC to get the batteries charged. Again, when electricity supply is cut down, probably what happens is it draws the DC current from the batteries and converts it back to AC so that your appliances in the home can run smoothly. Even if there is no power, they can run on backup, right? So it's a two-way adapter that is being implemented by inverter. But it's an implementation of adapter only. Just that two adapters assembled into one module. Yes or no?
Yes, Ankit.
Next is the category called as behavioral patterns. Something to do with the object behaviors. This is where we talk about how the objects interact and communicate with each other. Probably this is where I might be looking for some sort of command being given to the object. I mean, some method being called. Maybe I'm having some sort of observer configured, which just looks for a change happening in the object state and notifying the other object that, okay, the state of that object has changed. Like your bank account balance whenever changed, automatically an SMS and email is triggered. Yes or no?
Yes.
So SMS sending object is different, email sending object is different, and your bank account object is different. Three objects are there, where your bank account object probably is configured with observer, which makes your bank account being observed. The moment there is a change detected, automatically an SMS is triggered by notifying the SMS service. Similarly, an email is triggered by notifying the email service by the observer. Understood? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Ankit.
More on this, we will be discussing in our next session. As I said, in the next session, we'll be actually talking about the patterns, precisely gang of four patterns or GOF patterns only. Got my point?
Yes.
Next is, what are design principles? Patterns are about one specific smaller problem, right? Whereas principles might be addressing a bigger thing, right? Bigger picture, probably the object as a whole, how my object should be completely composed of, what all services it must have, what all data members it must have, how the communication between the objects should be designed, how the dependencies of one object on another should be designed, whether it should be tightly coupled or loosely coupled or something like that. Mainly, the design principles say that none of the objects should have a tight coupling with the other. Means the object should be replaceable. Now see, few years back, we had the laptops where the CPU alone can be pulled from the motherboard and replaced with another CPU chip if the CPU becomes faulty. Same way the RAMs were replaceable as well. But now the device is being more compact and more compact in nature. What the architecture has been designed like, where the CPU is soldered on the board, your RAM is also soldered on the board. So if any of the module falters, probably you need to change the complete board itself, which is more costly. Now this becomes more rigid architecture, isn't it? It was done for some betterment only so that people cannot do the service on their own, which probably protects your device from any unwanted intrusion or unwanted harm. But then it has got its own downside also, or consequences also. As I said, even if one of the module of the RAM is faltering, probably the entire motherboard needs to be replaced, which is definitely costly. Because it's not only motherboard cost now, I need to pay for the RAM module plus CPU module also. Yes or no? Along with the board cost itself. Correct? If all are independent components, one can be replaced by another as far as the architecture is same. So for CPU, we used to have those pins, right? As far as the pin layout is same, any CPU can be put in. It need not be exactly same CPU which was there. I can replace i5 processor with i7 processor also because their pin architecture is exactly same. i5, i7, i9, even i3. This I series of Intel is entirely same in terms of pins, right? Provided it's a separate component. Now, separate component has got its own benefits. It makes your device more flexible. Yes or no? Maybe a little bulky at the end, but it makes your device more flexible, more upgradable in future because your needs will keep on changing. Am I right? Yes or no?
Yes.
So I hope you understand it. Like if we talk about the mobile chargers few years back, some 20 years back, the entire charger along with its cable used to be one unit. Am I right? Cable was not removable. So if your cable gets broken, or if that pin gets broken, or if the adapter is broken, the entire set needs to be purchased, which is costly. These days, it's no more the same case. If your cable is faltering, buy another cable. If your adapter is faltering, buy another adapter and use the same old cable. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes.
bringing down the overall cost compared to that single assembled unit. Am I right?
Yes.
So I hope everyone understands loose coupling and tight coupling. Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Single assemble unit is usually tightly coupled, whereas independent components being connected to each other when required and replaced by some other. Like the same adapter I can use for charging my Android phone as well as iPhone also. Though the pin architecture of, I mean, the cables of both the phones are different. iPhone uses lightning cable, whereas Android phones these days goes for either micro USB or maybe C type. Yes, but the adapter can still be the same, right? The other end is different based on which device I want to charge. Probably I can choose the cable, and using same adapter I can get each of the devices charged. Yes or no?
Yes.
I need not buy multiple adapters. I can save on money in that case. Correct?
Yes.
So loose coupling has got more benefits than its consequences, especially when it comes to the software development. It is even more highly appreciated if the components are loosely coupled. They help us in better versioning policies as well. Okay, one of the module I feel outdated. I want this to be updated. The logic has changed. The business needs have changed. So I just create another version of that module by keeping the external interfaces same. I just plug it in my application, replacing the older one, and it comes with new functionality, right? With a small configuration change, I can integrate the newer version. Make sense or not? Right. So what design principles are? What is its definition? Let's put that here based on our discussion. Design principles are high level guidances or guidelines, or best practices. Best practices means something which talks about what to do, what not to do, that help developers make informed, means known, decisions while designing software or software systems, to be precise. These principles provide a foundation for creating software that is more modular. This is where the loose coupling comes in. Flexible, again loose coupling. And because of this loose coupling, the third point also is applicable, that says makes it easy to maintain. So I say and easy to maintain. Right? Again, if I talk about most popular design principles, these are also applicable for object-oriented programming environments only. On the top comes in something what we call as solid principles, which are actually a set of 5 principles. And this solid is not one word. Actually, this represents an acronym for each of the 5 principles. There is a principle which starts its name with S, second is starting with O, third is starting with L, fourth one is starting with I, and fifth one starts with D. Can anybody tell me what are the actual full forms of these? SS,
Single
SRP.
responsibility.
Single responsibility.
SRP to start with, which stands for single responsibility principle. OS,
Open close principle.
Open close.
exactly. So we call this as OCP, open close principle. L is Liskov substitution principle or LSP. These are acronyms, and solid is acronym of acronyms, right? I is
Interface
Segregation.
inversion.
interface segregation
Segregation.
principle, right? So this is something what I put as ISP. And last, D is
Dependency inversion.
Injection.
dependency inversion
Injection.
principle.
Inversion. Yes.
Yeah, something to do with dependency injection only at the end. Dependency injection is the actual practical one, whereas inversion is something more conceptual. So both have a relation. So dependency inversion principle. Next is dry principle, which stands for
Do not repeat yourself.
don't repeat yourself. So it's something that talks about avoiding the duplication of the code. How do we achieve? This is easy. Suppose I'm looking for adding 2 numbers 100 times within my application. What we do? We probably create some static class within which we add the function that takes in couple of numbers as parameters and then does a plus b kind of thing on it, returns it. I mean, the sum of a and b is returned, the parameter sum is returned. And wherever it is being required, basically we just call this function by class name dot function name notification. So it need not be static all the time. Sometimes it might be operating on your object data as well. So it can be an instance method also. So the crux is usually this dry is implemented with the help of methods. Got my point?
Yes.
Next is the principle that stands for keep it simple and stupid. Usually you will not find and into this, but this makes it easy to read. If I put it like keep it simple, stupid, it looks like someone is calling ourselves stupid. So basically that's why I prefer putting and in between. Understood? Which talks about encouraging the developers to keep the solutions as straightforward as possible, which makes the entire implementation easy one to understand for anybody. Right? So if your solution looks very complex, this talks about breaking it down into multiple smaller components and ultimately you go for the simpler implementation. Next is Yagni, which stands for you ain't gonna need it. So write only those things which are actually required. Many times we design classes by assuming that, okay, these members may be required. Don't assume. Just focus on what is the actual business need. The classes can evolve over time if the need for some parameters, some data members, some functional members come in future. Those things can be added in future. Got my point? Yes.
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 Most of the principles have their names as acronyms only. Right? And then you have couple of other principles, composition over inheritance. What it says is, instead of using inheritance, look for the object instance being used in the other class and build on the top of that logic to add more logic to it, which actually allows your software to grow in any direction. So it makes your software more flexible. With inheritance, there is a tight dependency which gets created. So that's not the case everywhere applicable. Principles are also there basically to help you out in certain problematic situations. It's not like that something is there that means I have to use it. Right? Just like that power mode feature which we discussed about the vehicles. And then there is a principle called as law of Demeter. What is it? One module should not have the knowledge of the inner other objects that manipulates its state. So there should not be a kind of a dependency which is known to the user of your object also. Right? So any object instance which is getting created in my current class should not have any idea about what exactly or how exactly it is achieving it. Because with that, there will be some side effects which turn into the issues and bugs later on that will be introduced into your implementation. Car needs engine, so I'm using the engine instance. Like Tata mostly uses the Fiat engine into their vehicles. Now they don't interfere with Fiat to know exactly what Fiat is doing with the engines. They just use the engines. They provide their specifications to Fiat. Fiat makes those engines and they just put it into their vehicles. Understand?
Saket, one more thing. Is it related to abstraction only?
Somewhat related to abstraction only.
So,
Abstraction, I would say, is more related to composition over inheritance, right?
mhm.
But yeah, here also some concepts are there which will actually look like abstraction. Yes. Okay. So conceptually, all the things are clear, right? See if you have
Yes.
any questions. Here are the definitions for design patterns and design principles. Go through this, see if you have any questions.
Ankit, these design principles will be used in design patterns or so as you said, it is
It's other way around. It's other way around because design principles talk about a larger scope, larger problem. Usually design patterns will be the part of design principles at times, not all the time, wherever required, wherever applicable. Okay. Patterns are more about the very specific smaller issues, smaller problems. Understand?
Yes.
Just one more thing. The
Yeah.
regarding the Yagni means, is it just related to the code which we are not using means, or
Yes.
we just want to remove that unused code? That is the only that principle.
So it's not about removing unused code. It's simply about not adding that code to your implementation. Focus only on what requirement has been shared. Don't force something just because you know that this might be required in future to your users. Even if it is there, don't make it visible. Maybe you can keep those members as private, completely
Private.
hidden within the implementation, so that you save your time and efforts later on. But usually I will recommend even don't do that because that will ultimately increase the memory footprint of your application. Though it is private, it will be the part of the object, right? So better not to add it until and unless it is not requested. Got my point?
Okay. In means in short, it is kind of unreferred variables or unreferred methods. We can say.
Yeah, so it could be unreferred methods, it could be unreferred properties, means data members, anything. It could be unreferred events also, right?
Okay.
It doesn't mean that in one case I'm not needing something, that's why I should not add it. Overall, I'm not using it anywhere. Even a single percent usage is not there. Those things I will get rid of while cleaning up the code. Understand?
Okay. Good.
So not only while cleaning up the code, the right way will be right from the beginning. You keep this in mind so that you don't end up too much code to be cleaned, because code cleaning also is a practice that requires lots of focus. It takes in lots of efforts and time, right? Otherwise, you might end up removing some important code also at times. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about the differences between the patterns and the principles. First one I have already spoke about. What is the main difference on the top level? The scope. Design pattern focuses only one simple problem statement, very specific one. Like the requirement could be I have a collection of objects on which I need to do some processing, which will be same for each of the object within that collection. So I simply want to iterate over it. Maybe I'm looking for a iterator pattern, most effective iterator pattern. Like we discussed on day 2 that for each loop is best for that. Yes or no? But behind the scenes, for each is using iterator pattern. What is iterator pattern? We discussed about that also, like making a queue where there are two parts of it. One is the main queue and then there is a small temporary queue. That interview example which I spoke about. One person being interviewed, the other person waiting outside the cabin, whereas the entire other crowd is waiting at some common area. So the moment the first interview is completed, that person can send in the next candidate waiting outside the cabin in. And while going out from the common area, the next person can be sent in to wait outside the cabin. That is the iterator pattern. Very simple, very specific problem statement I had. And that's what usually the patterns will be about. They talk about smaller things, smaller issues. Got my point? Whereas design principles talk about more broader scope, more bigger scope. Maybe sometimes it can be about the overall design of the software system as well. They might contain some sort of rules, some sort of guidelines or concepts which have to be followed during the design process or architecture process. So while architecture is being laid out for the software, if you have followed some principles, the implementation will go smoothly by default. Right? So that's the first difference, scope and purpose. The next difference is the level of abstraction. Design principles are more abstract, more high level in nature. They don't talk about the exact solution for a specific problem. They are always about the overall architecture and the structure or the complete composition of your software system. Whereas the design patterns are more concrete with solutions. So other way around, I can also call them as they are implementation focused that provide the detailed solutions to specific challenges. Design level challenges only, but very specific areas. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now see, we have a very typical example for this. We have a central government. Federal government also is the other term that is used usually. What kind of laws they make? They are making the laws basically which are applicable in common to all the residents of the country, right? Common laws. But then there could be geography based issues also, and based on which there have to be some additional laws that need to be put into picture or put into practice, right? Different geographies probably require different ways of implementing laws. Sometimes they might be the modification of the laws made by the central agency, right? Sometimes they could be entirely different laws also, correct? So that's where state governments come in. Furthermore, you have district level governments also. Yes or no? Within districts, ultimately, again, there is another level. You have municipalities or gram panchayats, which do work at the very, very low level in the society. They are more accessible to public, right? Because they probably reside in that specific area and they are better aware of the situations and needs of the people in that area. That's why the structure has been built like this. Yes or no? So suppose my approach road to my apartment has got big potholes. Whom will I reach to? This is a small problem, very specific one. Should I reach central government for that?
No.
No.
Who is the right agency for me? Is it state government?
No, yes, you are municipal.
The local authority, the local municipal.
Probably my local authority which is represented by municipality or gram panchayat, whatever applicable in my area, right? In that also, it's not the main body. I'll probably reach out to the ward office, means my area office, correct?
Yes.
Correct. Now, if it is something to do with the relation between two different countries or some idea that I have, which probably allows me to build or to make some green fuel without affecting the environment, is it a local necessity or it's basically solving a bigger problem? Bigger problem. So in this case, this idea should be represented to central agency. Yes or no? That's how we decide. Even in case of design patterns and design principle. Design principle is all about the entire software, how you are going to build, what practices you are going to follow, what conventions you are going to follow. Whereas design patterns will be about very specific problem areas. Is that clear? Is that clear?
Yes.
Next is applicability. Applicability, again, somewhat an extension of scope and purpose only. I mean, at what stage the design principle or design pattern will be applicable. So if I talk about the design principle, these are applicable to almost all the stages of the software development lifecycle. So it can be right from the requirement gathering to documenting it, to creating the user stories, building the software architecture, then starting the implementation, right? Implementation with probably the agile process might require it to be broken down into multiple modules, which can be then mapped to different sprints, their outcomes. Outcomes will also involve some sort of testing into it, the beta testing, alpha testing, UAT, etc. Right? All the levels it will be applicable, all the stages. Whereas design patterns mostly will be coming into picture when you are writing code. So you are actually implementing the stuff. Yeah, within architecture also, the design patterns might be considered where you can put the guidance in the architecture document that, okay, here this pattern should be used. But practically, it will be more applicable during the implementation process or implementation stage to get a specific problem resolved. Like for each is more about implementation, right? Not about architecture. In architecture, I might put that, okay, iterator pattern should be used. But while implementing, I'll say, okay, for each I'll use which implements iterator pattern behind scenes. Got my point? So are both important? Both design principles and design patterns are both important?
Yes.
Important and essential as well, so that you can create properly structured or well structured, more maintainable, more scalable software solutions. Got my point? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so now we'll take a small break over here as my machine requires to be restarted due to an update. Once we are back, we will be actually looking at the implementation, and that we will carry on till the end of the session today. Okay, so it's almost 10:50 now. 11:10 we will resume. Got it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'll just get my machine also restarted. Hey guys, am I audible?
Yes, I
Yes,
can.
you are.
Just confirm if the screen is also visible.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So I would request all of you to start Visual Studio. As we are now going to look at the implementation of the different principles using C# language, starting with solid principles. So just to remind you what solid principles are, solid is basically an acronym for a set of 5 acronyms where each of the acronym in itself represents a different object oriented principle, correct? Where S stands for SRP, O is OCP, L is LSP, I is ISP, and D is DIP, right? So the first one would be about S, single responsibility principle. So can anybody tell me what exactly is single responsibility principle? What does it state?
A class must be have the single means reason to be changed. Means it should only represent only means one action means that.
Not one action, but it should be about one specific type of work. So suppose if it is
Right.
taking care of the database handling, it should be only database handling. Now in that, actions might be insert, update, delete, and different versions of select and all, but they're all one type of work, right? Interaction with the database, correct?
Only means a
Similarly, if the
single type of
class is
activity. The single type
single
of
type of
activity.
activity, correct, correct. Then if the class is representing some data structure, it should be only data structure. Say for example, if you work with some object relational mapping tool or something, in that case, you might be working with some classes being used as models, right? That class must have only model data. Ideally, no functionality. And even if there is some functionality, it is supposed to be something to do with the model data only. Like repurposing the model data, reformatting the model data from one form to another. That is okay. But apart from that, it should not have anything like database interaction or business logic. It should not have. Now you can understand why actually the solid principle is so important. The first principle itself says that break down your requirement into multiple units. For database interaction, you should have a different implementation. For representing data, you should have a different implementation. And then business logic should be a different implementation. And at the end, the presentation layer should be a different implementation altogether. So that's where we say it's single responsibility played by each of the implementation, and which also talk about uh, what we can say is role-based implementation, right? That okay, you have got the role to interact with the database. You have got the role to provide the business logic. You have got the role to interact with the user by presenting some UI, correct? So that the overall complexity can be reduced at the end. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So let's create a new project here. console app. Which one to select, you know? The one with these tags, Linux, Mac OS, Windows. So cross-platform version we are looking for. Let's say the name is CS underscore demo solid principles. Path is already taken. Just confirm that it is the correct path. If not, you can use this three dots button to change it and then say next. Select the version. So because you are using VS 2019, .NET 5 is the version that you can select at the most. Create. Let's go to Solution Explorer window and add a new class, or maybe for better and easier understanding, instead of writing the code in different class files, I'll put it here itself. Let's say I have got a class named as user service. Okay. Wherein the first member is a method that returns nothing. So void as the return type. The method name is register, takes in couple of string type parameters as input. The first one is string email, that is email ID. Second is string password. So basically, by what user ID password you want to register, where user ID will be represented as email. There I have the simple if statement, which first of all checks whether the email address is a valid email address or not. So let's assume that there is a method called as validate email, not present right now. We'll be adding it shortly as a helper method. This method must be returning a Boolean, true or false, by taking in email as the parameter. If the email is proper email address, it should just continue everything normally. If not, in that case, it should throw some exception. Let's see if we have some validation exception. Yeah, so we do have a validation exception built into .NET under the namespace system.component model.data annotations, right? If you don't exactly remember the name of the namespace, but you are sure that the name you have put over here is correct for the class or for the type, you just hover on it. This light bulb comes with the suggestion. So I hover here, I click on the arrow, it suggests you can use the using statement system.component model.data annotations. One way is I type it out on the top, or else I just click this option. It will automatically add the using statement that is required. And then I put the validation message here as string. Let's say email is not in valid format. If all good, keep continuing to execute this code. So I say var user equals new user. Let's assume there is a class called as user, wherein I'm passing the email and the password as parameters. And then I'm calling another helper method over here called as send email. Not created yet. We'll be creating it shortly. Where I say new mail message has to be composed, which comes from the namespace system.net.mail. So here I can just hover on it and get the using statement included, system.net.mail. The new mail message. What it takes in, there are 4 overloads I can see. So practically here, the second one suits me. From and to addresses I need to specify. And that can be specified as string also. So third overload I can use easily. Let's say I put my ID over here. This is the sender's ID. In the parameter for register. So I just pass email. And then I use object initializer for initializing some of the properties here. In fact, this has to go inside only. The statement will finish like this. Here I say the subject of the mail message will be registration successful, or whatever you feel is right. This is just a sample. So right now it doesn't matter what exact value you put. It can be anything. Right? Now here I need to actually get validate mail and send email methods created. Let's say here I have public virtual, because later on it may evolve. Bool validate email that takes in the string parameter email as input and then returns the conditional result based on email dot contains at the rate. Contains returns a boolean, true or false, just checks whether the string has got at the rate somewhere in between or not. I can also include dot. I can also use regex class to check the pattern properly. As of now, I'm just checking for at the rate just to keep the things easy, because here we are not learning to write how to write the code for validation actually. Let's say next is public bool send email. Send email also returns me some boolean value. The reason for that is basically instead of throwing exception if the email sending is failed, I can actually return false, notifying the user that okay, email sending got failed. And if all good, mail is sent successfully, I can return true. Right? For now, I simply go for let's assume there is an instance of SMTP client class by the name underscore SMTP client or just SMTP client. using which I call the send method and send the message. And the result of this, if you look at, is expected to be a Boolean. So I can just say return whatever the result is. Okay, code is not complete. There are few shortcomings like SMTP client is not defined. User class doesn't exist right now. That's okay. Ignore that for now. Just look at the code of this user service class and tell me if it is actually following SRP, single responsibility principle, or not.
It's not following FRP.
Reason?
So it has different functions involved in this. Registration as well as sending.
Registration is different, validation is different, sending email is different. It also has got some data implementation into it, right? Sending email should be a different service altogether. And there itself, it should have the validation. Before sending the email, it should check whether I've got the correct email address or not. Yes, because that is something specific to email. Registration should be a separate service altogether. Yes or no?
Definitely.
So how do I proceed to make this support SRP or follow SRP?
Write the different classes and read the functionality.
Let's say I rename this class to user service old for the time being. Later on, I'll just rename it and comment it altogether. I rewrite the whole stuff, starting with public class email service that provides me validation, that provides me email sending capability, right? So what it will have? An instance of SMTP client by the name SMTP client. There is a constructor for the class which takes in a parameter of type SMTP client, SMTP client. And because the name of this parameter and this data member is exactly the same, I can still initialize my data member by using this keyword. This dot SMTP client equals SMTP client. So whichever SMTP client is passed to the constructor, I'll just map it here and we'll use that same. Got my point? Yes. I hope it is clear till here.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Then I have got the functionality here. Let's say validate email and send email. Probably I can just copy validate email and send email from here. Validate email and send email both. I copy from my previous user service class and paste it here as the member of email service. Public virtual bool validate email that takes in string email returns email dot contains @ simple validation, and then public bool send email, which takes in mail message, and using SMTP client, it sends the message. Okay, this returns void. So a bit of change over here. Directly, I cannot say return. Rather, I cut this code. I put a try catch block. Here I say send message. If successful, I'll say return true. If there is an exception, optionally, I can put the code for logging. And instead of throwing exception, I can say return false. Yes.
Yes.
That way, if any exception is there, directly here I'll come. Logging code, if provided, will do the logging and then returns false. Otherwise, if all good, email sending is successful, I'm returning true. So my email service is taking care of everything about email, right from validation to sending email. Now see, there are multiple functionalities, but they are related. They're working on one single objective. Yes or no? I can send an email to an email ID which is valid email ID. So that's why validate email has to be there. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Now I just collapse this email service class and then I create my user service class again. So here goes public class user service. Here I instantiate my email service class, which we already created earlier by the name email service. Let's say I'm going to interact with database here using entity framework core. So I instantiate something called as DB context by the name DB context. This will require not only the namespace to be added, but a package also to be added to support entity framework core. So if you hover on it with the light bulb, it will actually show you an option install package Microsoft.entity framework core. Correct? And there it shows find and install the latest version. It's not the latest version actually you should be selecting. You should be actually picking up the version which is compatible with your .NET version. So I'll rather use install with package manager. Make sure you are on the browse tab here on the resulting window where it is searching for Microsoft.entity framework core package. Here is Microsoft.entity framework core. You can see the latest stable version seems to be 7.0.9, but the .NET framework version we are using is 5. Hence, the latest version in version series 5 should be used, which is 5.0.17. Why it is showing deprecated? Because the version 5 itself has been discontinued by Microsoft for support. So for now, you can ignore that. Deprecated doesn't mean it's removed. It's there, but in future it may get removed. I select 5.0.17. I hope everyone must be getting this. Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes, Sangeet, we got it.
Let's click install. It shows you the preview of the changes that will be made to your project configuration. So these are all the packages which will be installed. Let's say OK. And then for license, basically there is no choice but to click on I accept. If you don't accept, the packages will not be installed. So click on I accept and package should get installed. Okay, it says it is out of support. Will know. Okay, this is warning only. It's it's installed. How do we come to know that it's installed? The install button is replaced by uninstall and update buttons. So it's installed. Let's close this tab. Let's get back over here. And once again over on DB context, using this light bulb arrow, now there has to be a using statement as well. Using Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. Select this. You should have that added automatically on the top. Yes. And it's resolved. There goes the constructor of this class. User service. I'll make this constructor a parameterized one. So that takes in email service as first parameter. Email service. And DB context type as second parameter by the name DB context, which I'll initialize to my class members respectively. This dot email service equals email service. This dot DB context equals DB context. Done. Is it done?
Yes, Ankit.
Okay. So what is the next thing you expect here? Register method should be there, right?
Yes.
Now this has something to do with registration of user. It has to belong to this class, right? We say public void register is the member method which takes in string email and string password as the second parameter. And here goes the body. Which is more or less going to be what we did earlier. So probably the code for which I can copy from my old classes. If not, validate email, throw validation exception. Otherwise, just continue creating the user. Some additional code and some modification will be needed. Base code remains the same. So I copy this first and will make the necessary changes. So first change comes here. Validate email is not directly available here. It's available via email service. So ideally, I should say email service dot validate email. email as a parameter goes to it. If it is not valid, throw validation exception. If all good, continue creating the user. Now this user must be created first into the database as well. So here we say db context dot save user, which allows the user object to be saved in the database. And then send email can be called. But again, the send email belongs to email service. So here I say email service dot send email. Okay. This user class is giving error because there is a built-in class for this for user management, for which we have not included the package and the namespace, hence the error. So for now, you can ignore. Important is look at the implementation now. We segregated two different kind of functionality in two different objects. Each of the object, email service and user service, now are playing single role. Email service takes care of everything about email, and user service takes entire care about user registration. Yes or no?
Yes.
Can I say my code is now SRP compliant?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct? Let's collapse all the implementation except the main. Hello world console write line statement. I'll just get removed. Let's select the three implementations and comment it. So that for the further code, there will be no conflict. Got it?
Yes, Ankit.
So now, when we talk about the three-tier architecture also, don't you think that that architecture has been built somewhere around single responsibility principle? We have data access layer, we have business layer, we have presentation layer. Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? With that, your code also become more testable, correct? And more maintainable. Different teams can work on different implementations. The database expert team probably can work with data access layer. Those who understand the business functionality very well and are very good in logic building probably can take care of the business logic layer. And people with good user interface skills, good designing skills can take care of UI layer, presentation layer. Yes or no?
Yes,
This is
Ankit.
as simple as I cannot expect a doctor, MBBS doctor to repair my car. And the same way, I cannot expect a car mechanic to treat some illness. Car mechanic is qualified to repair the car. MBBS doctor is qualified to treat the illness. So give them the right work. Yes or no?
But
Based on
Sanket,
their skill. Yeah.
yeah, but now they nowadays they call it a full stack. So how do you agree on that?
Sorry, come again.
Nowadays they say full stack. Everyone should be a full stack developer. UI.
See, That's correct up to certain extent, because if you are not very much qualified in everything, but you know some portion of it, basically you don't need to depend on someone else to finish that job. Maybe the polishing work might be taken care of by a different team or different member of the team, right? To avoid the delays, basically we say that, or that has become a requirement. Got my point?
Yes, yes.
And another reason is your implementation is happening in such a way that the components are becoming very smaller and smaller and smaller day by days. You're breaking down the components up to a level where only one or two statements lie there in one functionality. So that makes the overall implementation, overall understanding very easy. Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. So basically, there are two different concepts, two different views, which sometimes go hand in hand as well. If I don't know the database programming at all, there is one way: I leave it or I learn it. Learning sometimes might be taking time consuming. So what my manager will decide, okay, you learn it over the time. Do learn it, but not for this project probably. Yes or no? By next project, you should be ready, or next to next project, you should be ready. This is what your manager's response will be. Yes or no? Overnight, someone cannot learn something. Correct? But database, I just used for example. It can be any skill. If I'm not good in React, I cannot be doing React programming overnight. Am I right?
Yes, Ankit.
So two different views, point of views goes hand in hand. Okay. Okay. So let's move on to the next principle, O, open close principle, OCP. What it says, open for
Extension,
One for
extension
extension,
and closed for
modification.
modification. What does it mean? Your composition should be such that any extensible code is allowed, but existing implementation should not be modified at all. Existing implementation should not be touched. It should just keep on using the existing implementation as it is. Correct? So I'll start the same way. First without OCP, and then we'll look at why OCP is important. So let's say we have a class rectangle. Purposefully using simpler examples, reason that makes the understanding easy. I have a property over here. So type prop, double tab, and then the data type I'm looking for as double. Name of the property is height. Then I have public double width. So this looks to be a data structure class, right? It is. Next, I have, according to SRP, I'm implementing it. So I'm segregating the data structure and the functionality. Let's say there is a class called as area calculator, which has got the functionality to calculate the area of the given object. So there is a member method, public double total area, which takes in multiple rectangle objects and calculates the area for each individual rectangle and provides me the sum of the areas of all rectangles. So something like there are multiple plots, rectangular plots. I want the total area. Probably those plot belongs to me, may not be adjacent, so that I cannot just calculate as one big rectangle. They are randomly placed. And height and width of each, or length and width of each, is different. In that case, I need to calculate the area of each rectangular plot separately and add to the aggregate. Yes or no? So I'm taking in an array of rectangle. It could be a collection also, like list. Let's say I call this as ARR rectangles, means array rectangles. Or whatever name you feel is good. I have a local variable area initialized to 0. Then I go for an iterator pattern for each rectangle in. Rather than rectangle, I would prefer var, so that I need not know exactly what type of object it is. And I call this as obj. Whichever object it is in this array, take it. Then area plus equal to, so whatever is the area value, add the result of obj dot height multiplied by obj dot width. Each individual rectangle area is calculated, added to area. Remembers it for the next iteration and just keeps on doing that. And then at the end, it returns area. Got it? So SRP is being followed. No problem. Yes or no?
Yes.
No violation of SRP. It's yes, SRP compliant. But then, can our application be actually ready for the case where the total area should be returning me the area regardless of the shape? Whether it is rectangle or circle or triangle or trapezium or hexagon, pentagon, whatever it is, it should return me the aggregate area of whatever shape it is. And each shape might be different as well in some cases. There are 3 rectangles, 4 circles, 5 ellipses, 3 triangles, and so on. It might be a mix of objects, shape objects. Is it ready to get that done?
No.
No.
This is where OCP seems to be a challenge. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, let's copy this class and comment it and collapse it. Let's say here I have another class, circle. As I said, I may have multiple types of shapes. So rectangle is already there. Next is circle, which has got a property of type double by the name radius. Radius is more than enough for circle, right?
Yes.
I want to rewrite my area calculator class in a way that it takes care of both the type of objects. As of now, that is the requirement. Rectangle and circle are the 2 types of objects. So I paste that copied code for area calculator. Original one is commented already. This one I'm going to modify. How it modifies? Instead of saying rectangle, which will allow me to have array of only rectangles, can I say it is an array of objects? Hence the name also will change. Object is parent of everything, which means I can have object of any type. Rectangle, circle, anything. Yes or no? Tomorrow, if I add triangle to it, that will also work. Yes or no?
Yes.
Public double total area is what we are talking about. Here, the first modification is here. Then I say double area equals to 0. Then probably I say there is an instance of rectangle class by the name obj rectangle. I'm not actually instantiating it, just a variable declaration is there. Same way I have obj circle of circle type. And there goes for each, where obj in. I don't have air or rectangles anymore. I have objects. Right? Right?
Yes.
Yes.
Now you can understand why I used where. It just finds out whether our object element is rectangle or circle at the time when it is actually getting processed. Yes. If I put rectangle or circle, it will pick only those objects which are of that type. Where makes it possible for any type. Am I right?
Yes.
Now, directly I cannot go for this. So let's select and cut this code. First put an if statement. If check if your object is of type rectangle. So there is an operator in C# called as is, where I can say if it is rectangle, then area plus equals to object dot height multiplied by object dot width. And before that, in fact, I need to say obj rectangle or just obj. In fact, we will use obj rectangle here equals typecast object to rectangle. This way, or the safer way, I'll prefer with as operator. We discussed about it in the morning, right? And then a small change, instead of obj dot height, here I'll say obj rectangle dot height. Obj rectangle dot width. Correct? There is no problem at all. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Saket,
Yes.
but it breaks the single responsibility, right? So if whichever
Is
the
it?
shape,
See,
whichever the shapes, yeah.
it's not breaking single responsibility, because here the responsibility of total area is to calculate total area. Am I moving away or deviating from that?
Mm,
Think logically. Yeah,
okay.
if I'm
But
calculating area for rectangle and circumference for circle, then I'm deviating from SRP. Is that the case?
no.
I'm not violating SRP, right?
Okay. But means in future, suppose right now we have circle and rectangle only. And in
Yes.
future, if we want to calculate the area of the triangle, so we need to modify the class that is the
Yeah,
area
coming to that.
calculator.
Coming to that. Let me complete this first.
Okay.
Obj circle dot radius. What is the formula for circle area?
It's, I think,
Uh,
pi r
Pi r
square.
square.
Pi
Pi
r
r
Pi
square,
r
square.
right?
square.
R square has happened here, and I need the value of pi also. So here there is a built-in class in .NET called as math, which gives me a static property called as pi, which gives me the value of pi at real time. Okay. Yes. Now say in future, if you are looking for triangle, just one more if statement needs to be added over here. So that's what we said. What is OCP? Open close principle. Open for extension. So here we are opening for extension. Close for modification. So where your rectangle and circle class is modified. It's not modified. Their usage basically is where we are providing the extensions. Rectangle needs to have area calculated. Circle needs to have area calculated. For that, we have a separate class dedicated, and that is open for extension. This can be further made better. That's what we will see next. But I hope this is clear till now.
So here,
Yeah.
where is the place for extension?
This portion. You have to add just if statements further. If else, if else, if else, you have to keep on adding. Yes? Either if
Yes,
else or it can be switch case also, correct?
yes, yes.
Okay. Let's
Yeah.
comment out
Yeah.
this class.
Okay. Means I just want to say means instead of this we can do the shape as a base class and we are
Correct.
having the
That's what the next
abstract
thing.
method.
That's
Okay.
what the next thing we will be looking at to make it even more better. So let's
Yeah.
comment out area calculator. And here, let's create an abstract class called as shape. Public class. I'll use abstract keyword as well to make the class abstract. Class shape. Here I have one abstract member, which basically is responsible to calculate the area of individual shape. That doesn't take in any parameter. Whichever shape this area is called on, its area should be calculated so that the if statements can be avoided. And this then becomes a proper open closed example. Make sense? You will not be actually modifying anything in that case. Let's see. I probably get my rectangle class copied, commented, pasted here. Same way, circle class copied, commented, and pasted after rectangle class. With some modifications we will be implementing. So your focus should be on shape class. Your new rectangle class now inherits from shape. Now shape is an abstract class with an abstract member, area, which makes it mandatory for rectangle class to have area into it. or be an abstract class itself, right? So here I go and say hover on rectangle, light bulb arrow, implement abstract class. By default, it puts in my overridden area method in place, wherein I say return height multiplied by width. So this calculates the area of the rectangle on which the area method is called. Now you can expect what I'm going to do with circle. Same thing. Make circle inherit from shape. Over on this circle class with this light bulb arrow, say implement abstract class, same way what we did earlier with rectangle. Remove this, and here I put return math.py multiplied by radius multiplied by radius further. Now, if I want triangle, later on I can just create one more class triangle that it inherits from shape, which makes it mandatory to override area method and which contains the triangle area calculation code into it. So there it makes it proper OCP based implementation. Make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Here
Means
comes our, yeah, go ahead.
means this shape we are open for
Correct,
extension.
correct. Because extension usually comes with inheritance, right? So principally or logically, if we look at that if statement, that also is a kind of extension, but looking at the code, it doesn't look like an extension, right? I'm not extending anything. I'm just adding more code. So it gives the feeling that I'm still modifying something. And OCP says closed for modification. So it looks like going against OCP principle, correct? With this kind of implementation, I can see, I can feel that yes, OCP is in place. Correct? Here comes a area calculator, which again has got public double area or total area method that takes in what it should take now. Object? No. I can directly go for shape by the name ARR shapes. Right? Has got a local member double area equals 0. Then the iterator for each. Shape. Instead of shape, it will be again better if I use var, so that it may represent rectangle, circle, triangle, whatever applicable. Correct? Next, here I say area plus equal to whatever the current shape is, I call area method on it. So respective area method will be called. If it is a rectangle, rectangle's area method will be called. If it is circle, circle's area method will be called. If it is triangle, triangle's area method will be called. And the area will be calculated and returned, which will be added to the total area, which I return here. Make sense or not?
Yes.
I hope this is very much clear. See if any query is there.
So while creating object for this area calculator dot total areas, so I will pass
Yes.
triangle or circle.
I will basically create the array of shape within which I can pass n number of rectangles, n number of triangles, and n number of circles, or whichever shape. If I have only rectangles to play with, I will pass all rectangles. Got my point?
Yeah.
So it will automatically adjust. Yeah. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on to the next principle, that is Liskov substitution principle. For that, we will collapse all the classes here till area calculator and get them commented. Collapse them all together. It's just like we are starting fresh. Now, what is Liskov substitution principle? What it talks about?
Uh, it's basically your parent class reference variable should point to the child class object without any error.
Yeah,
Means
so practically with parent, I should be able to interact with any child class. Just like in case of shape, I'm passing shape, but then if I'm specifically talking about rectangle, I should be able to use it. Derived class should be able to replace parent class anywhere. And whichever derived class I want, I should be able to use that to replace parent. It should behave in exactly same manner without any changes. How it was behaving with the parent class itself. Right. So basically here we need to ensure that the derived class is not affecting the behavior of the parent class at all. I should not have any changes. Understood? Behaviorally, there should be no changes. Is it clear?
Ankit, I can say the child class should not break the parent class
Correct. Correct.
type
So
definition or the behavior.
exactly. Exactly. So that's what, in other words, you can say. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see the example here. Again, approach will be same without LSP and then with LSP. Let's say I have got a class called as SQL file. Okay. What it has got is a property. So prop double tab. String is the data type by the name while path the property exists. I create one more property same way. Prop double tab string file text is the name. So assume that we are going to do something with file handling. Not really, just a simulation. Here I have a member method that returns me a string. And the name of the method is load text. Purpose of which is basically to return the contents of the file. So for now, I can say it is returning file text. Okay. Then I have public void save text, which contains some code to save text in a file. Very specifically, I can say SQL file. Got it? Let's import a namespace on the top, system dot collections dot generic as some collection class we are going to use. Done. One more class I create here after SQL file. So let's go with public class SQL file manager, which contains a property of type list. It's a generic collection, so I need to specify what type of list it is. Let's say SQL file is the type of each of the member. And I name this as SQL files. Next is I have a method here that returns me a string. The name of the method is get text from files. I use the string builder class over here, for which I need to import one more namespace. So here I'll say using system.text. System.text provides me string builder. SB equals new string builder. Now you must be aware of that the string actually is an immutable object, means once created, it cannot be modified. If your code involves a lot of string manipulation, don't use string directly. Rather use string builder, which allows manipulations on the same object and get the final string built out of it. Then use string. Okay. Manipulation should be done on string builder. Here I iterate on each file. So let's say I call it as var file in SQL files. What I want to do is I want to append the content of each of the file into the string builder. All SQL files I'm reading at once. And here I say file dot load text. Each file gives me text that I'm appending to the string builder. And at the end, I'll return sb.toString. As I said, all manipulation done. Then the final immutable string I build from it. Similarly, I have another method, public void save text to files. There I iterate using for each. and say var file and SQL files again, where I say file dot save text. So on individual files, whatever the content is there, I am saving that. So far, the code looks good, isn't it? Should be able to take care of all the scenario where we want to read, where we want to write from and to the files. Yes or no?
Yes.
There is one case. What if there is one or more files which are read only? Can I save to them? Reading is fine, but can I save to them? Save to read only files, I mean.
No, we cannot save.
That's the challenge, which probably prompts us to go for Liskov substitution principle. Ideally, I should be able to provide some independent logic there, right? Yes or no?
Yes, Ankit.
Yes.
So I'll copy this class, comment this one. Okay, collapse it and then paste it back and we'll make some changes. I'll say I have a list of SQL file and that should be a nullable SQL file. So I put a question mark here, which makes it nullable. Okay. Get text from files, contain string builder object. I'm iterating. There is no problem with read operation, right? The challenge was here with save text to files. Yes or no? Iteration is also fine, but I cannot blindly go for this. I can go for this if and only if the file is not read only. So I say if not file is read only SQL file. I'm checking that it is not read only. Then save text on it. Assume that there is a class by this name. Fine. We'll be writing it shortly. I hope the logic is clear here. If not file is read only SQL file means it's not read only. Then save text. Otherwise, don't save text. Is that clear? Is that clear?
Yes.
Which means I need some alteration to this also. I copy this SQL file class, comment it, collapse it. I add it back over here. And I say this implements an interface which decides whether it's a read only or it's a read write operation supported file. So let's say it implements an interface I writable SQL file along with I readable SQL file. These are not built-in interfaces. These are user-defined interfaces only, which you can create. Right? Let's do that to avoid this error. Let's say I have a public interface by the name I writable SQL file. And there is another interface, I readable SQL file, so that the errors are gone. I'm interested more in identifying whether this class implements this interface or not. There are no members to them, but they are actually providing some additional metadata. That if this file implements both, means it's a read-write file. If it implements only readable, that means it's only read-only file. If it implements only writable, means it's only a writable file. We cannot read from it. Is that clear?
Yes.
Let's say if we want to add some member, we can also put something like there is a member, load text, writable. Writable on the other hand should have save text. And similarly, readable SQL file must have load text. By default, the members of an interface are public. Correct?
Yes.
And interface provides pure abstraction. Unlike abstract class may have concrete members also, whereas interface cannot have concrete member at all. Is it clear?
Yes, Ankit.
Now the SQL file probably has got load text, save text both into it, right? Then I have SQL file manager class. Any changes that I need here? Probably I can make this method accept a list of I readable SQL file files. And then here I can say this is just files. I'm assuming all files will be at least readable. So by default, the parameter itself is bringing in the list of files which are readable files, which are implementing I readable SQL files. So read logic goes without condition. And then save text to files. This method, same way, takes in a list of I writable SQL files. What change I need here is this becomes files, where file in files. No condition required. If it is I writable means it is already checked. So I don't need this. No condition required. Directly I call file.saveText. So I pass object of a specific type of files and it just works. because too many conditions at times can affect the performance of your application. Conditions usually take more processor time, right? More CPU cycles. So here with this, I am actually avoiding the condition. Is it clear? So practically here I get the list of files which are readable. They may be writable as well. Read write both is allowed. But read write both allowed means they are at least readable as well. Whereas this method will take in all writable files. So this may include only writable or read write also. Basically, the file class must have iWritable SQL file implemented. The other members it will not take, so I don't need to check. I am assured that each file object over here will be a writable file, not read only. Understood? So with the help of interface, I am actually substituting the objects. And that's what Liskov substitution principle is all about. Instead of talking about a specific type or specific file or specific object, I am saying, okay, it must be of this type. Now, which type actually it is, I don't care. It must be implementing this interface means it is of this type. Only abstraction I'm checking, right? Is that understood?
Yes.
Great. So that is it for today. You can practice the first three principles of solid: single responsibility principle, open close principle, Liskov substitution principle. That's where till what we have seen the implementation, right? See if you have any queries in the next session. Next session will start with those queries, and then followed by that, we will be first taking up the interface segregation principle and dependency inversion principle, followed by gang of four design patterns, which will continue in the Friday session as well. Total 24 patterns we have, right? Definitely will not be discussing all, but the most important patterns we will be going through. But each pattern needs at least 10 to 15 minutes. So you can understand 2-3 sessions will be needed. At least 2. Right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed the session. Please keep on practicing and see if you have any queries. You can just share your queries with me over my email ID as well. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Thank you.